virtually, that we do it through the chat or after the presentation, but feel free to reach out. I am happy to answer any questions that you have. So go ahead, Lynette.
Northern California, wild nature, a beautiful coastline and working waterfront communities. This area is also known as the Lost Coast. In this magical place, something new is on the horizon. California's first commercial-scale land-based salmon facility. Currently in permitting, this cutting-edge facility by Nordic Aquafarms will farm salmon in indoor tanks with designs that are escape-proof. It will produce fully traceable, high-quality fresh seafood from egg to packaged fish out the door while protecting the environment and the surrounding ocean. Our chosen home is Humboldt, a vibrant community with a proud industrial history, a long tradition in seafood and agriculture, and a passion for giving birth to new sustainable industries. Aquaculture is one of those industries.
We want people that are passionate about what we're doing and passionate about producing fish. And we see a lot of people with that passion here.
Humboldt offers clean, cold water resources, access to competitive power supply, and great infrastructure. Humboldt is also close to 50 million consumers, which allows us to reduce the carbon footprint compared to imported fresh seafood. This is a modern seafood facility that recycles 99% of its water. 1% is sent through an advanced water treatment plant that removes most of the nutrients and particles from the water before it is safely discharged far offshore from Humboldt. Nordic Aquafarms was built on a vision of environmental sustainability with low-impact food systems that are resilient to climate change effects, such as warming oceans.
We've been a front runner in the industry, and we are proud that we have never had any major disease outbreaks, never any escapes, nor any major incidents in our farms.
All this results in an innovative, high-quality seafood product with minimal impact on the environment and significant benefits for Humboldt.
Was a feel-good video how we present both our project and Humboldt to the rest of the world. So I have a presentation, so we'll see if we can have that shared. Lynette, are you able to share the presentation? There you go. Thank you. Good. Then we can go to the next slide. If you look at the challenge we're facing right now in the world, you see the red and the orange areas in the graph. They're the wild-caught fish, the amount. And as you see, it's been growing up to the mid-80s and then kept pretty steady going forward. And then that's where you see the growth in aquaculture. And as of today, it's about 50-50 share of fish that we eat that's produced on land or caught in wild catch fisheries. And that's the situation that we're facing at this point. And that's why it's important to also increase the amount of aquaculture, but you have to do it sustainably. If you go to the next slide, in the same period, you see that there is a 14% increase in global captures fisheries from 1990 to 2018, while you see a 22% growth in the demand. That's why you see that the farm fish or the aquaculture is growing quite a lot in the period. And that has posed some challenges to the ocean. And it has resulted in both environmental and biological challenges in many areas. And that's why we're now looking into new solutions. If you go to the next one. As I said, it's extremely important that we have find ways of producing fish sustainably. You see all the climate change challenges. You see all the plastics in the ocean. You see all the overfishing and bycatch. And as you see from the slide, more than 90% of the top predators are wiped out. And you have problems with ocean acidification and algae blooms. And we want to produce, when we start producing fish on land, as you saw in the video, it's to take some of the problems out of the ocean and not being part of the problem and contribute to these situations you see here on the slide, which I think is really important. And that's the vision behind creating the company and going on land. Another reason why it's important to go on land is that you can move the production closer to the consumers. As of today, it's only a few places in the world where you can produce, when we're talking finfish, salmonids or finfish in this situation. You can produce it in Norway, Scotland, Iceland, Faroe Islands, and you can produce it in New Zealand and in Chile. That's the main places where you can produce it, and in Canada, of course. The only place left in the US where you can produce finfish in the ocean is northern Maine. It was outlawed in Washington State. I don't think it's ever going to come back. You still have some production in net pens in Canada. But they also said, the Prime Minister also said that he wants everything to be moved on land by 2025. So this is the trend. But then now we can produce it closer to the consumers. So we have 2 farms that's being permitted and proposed here in the US. One in Maine, which is close to the northeastern consumer market. And then the one in California, which is close to the West Coast consumer market. So for both these farms, we have approximately 50 million consumers within 12 hours travel distance by truck. So that's one of the benefits, and that's why you see a surge in proposed recirculating aquaculture farms or land-based farms here in the U.S. as well. Go to the next one. When you produce it on land, close to the consumers, you can take out the air freight. All the fish, more than 90% of the fish that's, or fresh fish, fresh seafood eaten in the US is air freighted into the country from overseas. And that leaves a huge carbon footprint from air transportation. If you see that orange bar, that's the CO2 emissions from air freight. And if you look at the second bar, you see where as long as you use renewable energy, you can cut the carbon footprint anywhere from down to way below 50%, but probably even closer to 30–35%. And that's good for the global environmental or the carbon footprint as well. And as we know, carbon footprint don't see any borders. So whatever is good for the globe is good, or the world is good for, locally in the close to the markets as well. So you can go to the next one. So what we do then is that we take everything, we produce it, we source the eggs from places where they egg producers. It goes through the hatchery, then it goes into smolt production or fish fry, and then it goes into the grow out facilities. And that's what's actually new. Most fish, even wild caught fish on the West Coast, start their life in hatcheries and are released into the ocean. We take it all the way up to harvest size indoors. And then we perch the fish, and then we harvest on site and process the fish on site to either head-on gutted fish or fillets. So then you get a fully traceable from egg to harvest local production, high quality production. The fish also swim, when you have them indoors in tanks, they swim in the current. So you get a very good lean, firm texture. And as long as you feed them high quality feed, you can avoid antibiotics, GMOs, growth hormones, and you can get a high quality product that you deliver close to the market. It's not going to be wild caught fish. And we have these discussions with, you know, the fishermen locally as well. It's a different, our aim is to replace the imported fresh fish. There is a growth in the market. So either we'll, you know, capture that growth with our production, or we will replace imported. That's the target. It's never going to be, it's a different kind of fish than the wild caught fish, but still is a very good alternative to the traditionally farmed Atlantic salmon. You can go one more slide. Our company is one of the pioneers in RAS. It stands for Recirculating Aquaculture Systems. We have a farm in Norway, can you go back one? Yeah. Fredrikstad Seafood. That's the first large-scale RAS salmon farm in Norway. We got a R&D license to start it up initially. And it's online, it serves incredible fish. And it's, as we said, the first large-scale RAS in Norway. There have been a few ones in Denmark, one in Switzerland, of all places, and a couple here in the US and Canada. But this is the first large-scale and one of the biggest ones when it was brought online. What we see now, though, is that all farms are getting bigger, especially when they're sized to the American market. We have 2 farms in Denmark where we produce kingfish. And then we have 2 projects in Belfast and Humboldt. Belfast will be Atlantic salmon. Humboldt will be either salmon or steelhead. We still have to apply for both on the West Coast. You can go one more. As I said initially, it's important to do this in a sustainable and environmentally sustainable way. And what's important is we have a what they usually call ESG reporting, environment sustainable reporting. We have a scorecard, and we set targets, and these are targets that we need to achieve, both in terms of the authorities where we are, in terms of the stakeholders and the communities, but also towards the consumer market. So we say that we have, we can guarantee that there will be no escapes from the facility. I'll show you some drawings later, but basically everything happens indoors in these buildings. The fish is never outside. It's never, you know, touching any body of water except for the one in the tanks. We take up 99% of the nutrients in the discharge water, and more than 85% of the nitrogen. And we also have very high and strict biosecurity measures. So we take a clean or treat all the intake water and the discharge waters, so we can avoid parasites, we can avoid sea lice and disease and any kind of pathogens. So as long as you have good biosecurity measures, and several of these tanks are contained systems. So if something happened to one tank, or they're actually in pairs of 2, if something happens to these 2 tanks, we can ensure that it doesn't spread throughout the facility. So so far we never had any disease or any pathogens coming in that's not supposed to be there. Same with the fish feed ingredients. We're not using any growth hormones. We're not using antibiotics. We're not using any kind of pesticides, and we're not using GMOs. In Europe, you cannot use GMOs, and here, you know, see a lot of fish feed with GMOs. They're trying to avoid that. We want to produce a healthy and natural product. And the same with the CO2 emissions. As we say, we will reduce it significantly by producing it closer to the consumers. Even though, I mean, we do use some power in this facility, but it's still much, much less impact on the environment than importing it. We also have a target that says we're going to use 100% of the fish. When you do get a head on gutted fish, usually the heads and the guts will account for about 16% of the fish. And that's a high, it's a very valuable product. You can use it, we can excrete the blood and reuse it. We can use the fish remains from the fish for pet food, for fish oil, etc. And even the residual feed and sludge and the feces is a high valuable product that can be used for biogas and fertilizers, etc. So it's always a goal to use all of the fish. And in Maine, we have what we call like a lobster bait project, where you use the heads and guts for lobster bait. And since we're reducing the marine protein in the fish feed, basically we're producing more fish than we're extracting from the ocean. So it's a net positive impact on the ocean. And that's actually something we can look into here as well, with crab bait, for example. Next slide. Well, this is the video that you just saw. I guess you're all familiar. This is the site as it looks today. All of this will be part of the facility, and we will take down and demolish all of this and clean up the site. It has been cleaned up through EPA funding, and whatever is remaining we'll take care of and clean up. So this is what it looks like today, and I think the next pictures show what it will look like. Go to the next one. Yes, this is a rendering of the facility. As you see, the smokestack and the tall boiler building is coming down. We're looking into keeping the water tank in the front. And then we're building 2 large grow-out facilities. That's the building to the north and the one to the south. The building next to the water tank is the fish processing and perching, where basically what you do is you starve the fish for a few days before we harvest to get any off flavor, any feeds out of the system, to get it clean, very high, good tasting fish. Behind that building, you see the hatchery, and behind the water tank, you see the wastewater treatment plant. This will be one of the largest wastewater treatment plants probably in Northern California, I assume, where we take in and treat all the water. And behind you see oxygen tanks, etc., and that we use in production. So it's a fairly large facility, but we've tried to design it so it fits well in with the surroundings and have as least visual impact as possible. So this is seen towards the south from the north. We have, it's a little, the colors are a little bright on this drawing, but it's basically designed in a color scheme or pattern. So when you see it from a distance, it kind of blends in with the surroundings and the skyline. So you can see that it kind of reduces the impact of the building. Next one. Oh, this is the one from the front. I think the glass building will be retracted a little bit more into the building, and that's to ensure enough setback from the dunes. But it will look more or less like this. So we'll have a office building and some open areas in the front here. Next one. Yes, fish escape. I think it's very important to ensure that any species that you have, even if you do native species or if you do others, you want to prevent any kind of fish escape. And that's important for us as well. It's an all-female stock, so they wouldn't be able to reproduce. But anyways, we take several measures. So all production areas are 200 to 300 feet away from open water sources. So the only theoretical way fish could escape would be through pipes. I've been asked questions, but what if there's an earthquake or a tsunami? And even though, I mean, we do design the facility and build the facility so it can withstand any significant earthquake. And also it's designed so even with a tsunami, the fish, worst case, the fish would die because we don't have any access to clean water and power, but they wouldn't be able to escape from the facility itself. Even with sloshing of water in the tanks, there are fish net that would, capture the fish. So it should be designed to be escape-proof, even with any significant seismic or tsunami event. There's a series of physical barriers. The smallest filter that we have is 0.04 microns. A strand of hair is about 40 to 50 microns. So it's super, super, it's very, very finely meshed. So nothing can really get through it. You can take the next, yes. And I'll show you some design the next page too. So basically, as we said, the facility is escape-proof, and that is one of the. I think there are two things that we usually hear and that I've heard in Humboldt as well. And one is, can the fish escape? And the other one is, what about the discharge? Are you cleaning the discharge? And will it have any impact on the ocean? To address, this is the fish escape. To address the discharge, you can look at I think it's the next slide. Well, actually, this is the fish, the escape first. So there's so many barriers and filters and bioreactors and UV dosage that a fish would have to swim through to be able to escape. So, and even drains in the floor. So it's basically not only theoretically, but also physically, impossible, empirically impossible for fish to escape. If you look at the next slide, well, you could just go all the way through. This is what we do with the water. So in each tank, you have what is called a denitrification system. You have to take the water out and exchange it and clean it so the fish won't suffocate. And then we take out most of the nitrogen. Now it's the new technology. We're continuously improving it. So we're closer to 90% at this point. And then it goes back into the tanks. We have a chemical reduction to reduce the phosphorus. We have membrane filters, the 0.04 micron filter that will take out any particles and bacteria and the biological oxygen demand and the total suspended solids. And then it goes through UV light to take out any pathogens or any other potential harm in the water. So it's the water that comes out. It's a little salty. It's but it's still, I mean, it's drinkable, except for the salt. So you could actually drink it. It's clean water. So, and that's important. And but people say, why do you do it? We're depending on this water to raise our fish, and the fish requires pretty clean water. And we also want to make sure that we discharge clean water back into the ocean again. Next one. This is the timeline on the project. We announced it about 1.5 years ago. It's a pretty big project, so it takes time. We spent quite a lot of time meeting with stakeholders in the community, doing preliminary due diligence and design. And we're currently right now in the CEQA and permitting process. So we anticipate to submit our first permit application later this summer, and then the CEQA and the permits around October, November this year. It has been slowed down a little bit due to the COVID-19 situation. We're not able to travel and public entities have been closed or a reduced capacity. So, but you know, we still hope to be able to submit our application this fall and have it processed this fall and winter, spring. And if everything goes as planned, we will have permits before next summer, and then we will be able to start demolition and construction. It takes about 2 years from we start construction till the facility is completed. And we will build it in 2 phases. So we have a phase 1, and well, actually we have a phase 0, which is the demolition. Then we have a phase 1, which is half of the facility and all the shared infrastructure. And then we have a phase 2 that usually we'll say at least we'll have a year in operation before we initiate the phase 2. And we can put fish into, or eggs into the hatchery about a year after we start construction. So it takes about 3 years from the initial construction start till we have fish in the market. And then it takes time to build up the eventual biomass as well. So this is the project itself. And I guess we can open up for any kind of questions. I see there's a couple here on the Will the wastewater treatment facility have an Npds discharge permit? Yes, it will. We will not be producing biogas ourselves at this point. Let's see, did I get anyone else?
Yeah, Lori Tumis has a question.
Hi, thank you for taking me. Okay, so in the US, there's no regulation to ensure humane treatment of fish, you know, to monitor the conditions. And for all the good that you say your company's doing, I'm worried that there's no real third party to monitor the conditions of the aqua farms and what it's doing to the surrounding natural sea environment. And I'm talking about not just monitoring from the inside of your company. I can give, you know, many examples of what I'm concerned about, but that's it for a start. Thank you very much.
There will be, we're not there yet in Humboldt, but as part of the permits, there will be monitoring. We will have monitoring programs that are by third parties as well. When it comes to the fish health, this is our, you know, the fish is the greatest value that we have, and we have to treat them well for them to thrive and grow. And that's very important. So, and it's also very important for us to ensure that we don't have any disease or any kind of issues with the fish. So I would say it goes by the nature of being producing a high quality food and making sure that the fish thrive and grow. So we will, that's something that, you know, it's important for us to monitor, yes. And it's also schooling fish, and we take great care in terms of the density of the fish. We see when they grow and when they thrive and when they eat, and we always seek to optimize that. And that's I would say it's a fish welfare issue, but it's also a commercial issue for us. This is what we sell in our income, our revenue stream.
Gail Garman asked, what happened in phase 2 construction?
In phase 2, we have the second grow out facility. I don't know if you want to go, Lynette, do you still have the presentation? I can go back and show you the from the site plan. Do you want to share the presentation, Lynette? If you go down a little bit further down to, let's see. Number 12, I think, or number 11. Slide 11 be probably better. Yes. If you see the building to the north, which will be to the left on the screen, that's a phase 1 grow out building. Everything in the middle will be also part of phase 1. And then the large building to the south would be a phase 2. We will build the in the middle behind the one closest to Eureka in the middle. That's the hatchery. We will build that in phase 1, but part of it will be also used in outfitted in phase 2. There will be a small part of the building to the south built in phase 1 too, because that's where we have the water intake treatment facility. But basically, it's the production unit. So the grow out production units are 2 equal sized production units. So one is in phase 1 and one is in phase 2. So it's that building to the south. And there's also a leach field, existing leach field in the underneath that building. So we need to wait until the wastewater treatment plant in Samoa is completed. And they have just received their permits a couple of months ago. So I assume that will be constructed fairly shortly.
Okay. Susan Halpin asked, what will be the markets for the final fish product?
For the facility on the West Coast, it will be the West Coast market. So from Seattle all the way down California, probably down to Las Vegas, but you have approximately 50 million consumers within 12 hours trucking distance. So primarily the West Coast. We don't plan to ship the fish anywhere across the USA. That's why we have chosen a bi-coastal strategy. So we have a farm on the East Coast that will cater to the East Coast market, and then the farm on the West Coast that will cater to the West Coast market.
And Jane, you have a question?
I have several. First of all, where do you get your eggs at the outset? And are they from wild caught fish or from farm fish? My second question, do you want me to take them one at a time?
Yeah. We haven't selected a vendor for eggs yet, but you don't get them from wild caught fish. They are being bred for fish farming. So
who breeds them? Who breeds them?
There are several different suppliers. But we haven't selected a supplier yet. We need to select the species and also the supplier, but there are several different suppliers of eggs.
Okay. How do you, and what kind of feed do you use to ensure you're not getting GMO, et cetera? And do you have to use artificial dyes, or do you have the shrimp in the feed to make it red?
No, we're not using artificial dyes, and you can actually do that, naturally. I mean, wild caught salmon get their color from what they eat, and you can add, the same, what do you call it? And I forget the word for it, but it's you can add the same, like for example, krill, like they would eat. We're not using artificial dyes in the feed. There are several large feed suppliers, and you can work with the supplier and make sure that you can compose your own diet, or you can select a diet that has it goes from what we call like tier 1 to tier 4, depending on what they use. So you can also influence that and work with the suppliers. So we can actually require from our suppliers that we don't want any kind of GMO soy, for example, in the feed. It's a lot easier in Europe where you don't have GMOs, but that's our target too, to avoid GMOs as well. We have selected, we have different suppliers from feed in Europe, and what we anticipate to select in Maine. We haven't selected any feed yet in California, but I assume we will use some of the same suppliers. But you can basically dictate that as well.
Can you give me an example of what's in the feed normally?
I'm not a feed expert. Basically, you see them as pellets. You have vegetable proteins. You have typically you could have soy. You have any kind of marine proteins, marine oil, other nutrients. Anything else that I should add with feed?
Algae.
Algae, yes.
Oh, okay.
Microalgae as well.
I'm going to go into the next question. This is one of the participants says that
Thank you.
I'm not completely familiar with the farm versus wild controversy and arguments, but can you please address what those are or those that have not been addressed in your presentation?
Can you, you said the differences between wild caught and farmed?
She's saying that she's not familiar with the controversy and arguments about farmed versus wild.
Can you, I'm not sure if I understand the question.
She says she's not completely familiar with the controversy and argument. So maybe the pros and cons of those.
Okay. Well, I would say that wild caught fish is an excellent product. It's of course it's a seasonal product, and it varies, and it's very volatile. One year is really good, one year is not as good. If you go on the West Coast, there's a different species than usually you farm. Some people like the flavor, some people like the taste of it, and they like the idea that it's wild caught. Also, I think farmed. Most of the farm fish you have in the U.S. today is imported. And of course, yes, it's being fed a more or less natural feed. I mean, when you come back to feed, actually, what I should have said also, it's increasing use of insects, which is a natural diet for any kind of salmonids. It's a matter of preference, I think. Some people like the taste of farm fish, and some people like the taste of wild caught fish, and some people are against farming and fish farming, and other people think see that as an a option of actually creating more healthy sustainable proteins.
So another question we have is talk about local resources consumed, for example, fresh water.
It's very hard for me to, I'm going to turn up the...
No, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, local resources, I see that, consumed fresh water, yes. We are buying water from the water district, from surface water from the Mad River. They have an abundance of water, and as you know, you will lose your water rights unless you don't use it until 2029. And I think they would have liked to sell even more water than we were using. We anticipate to purchase about 2 million gallons a day. And I think they have a excess capacity of up to 30 million. So, and we're also taking water from the bay. There's a sea chest, an intake pipe, and it will be, the treated water will be discharged into the ocean in the existing outflow pipe.
I'm going to read Shirley's question. She actually, hers is sort of a two-part question. She's saying a huge concern with local tribes is the possibility of fish escape, like what happened in Washington State. And she is wondering if you have had a chance to reach out to the local tribes, and she is here and as a representative or a member of Trinidad Rancheria, and she's asking if your slides are available for local outreach.
Yes, we have met with, and I guess Lynette can speak to that as well. I think we met with most of the tribes, also Trinidad. We met with Ryan Sundberg and a couple other people in Trinidad. And yes, they are available. That's why, you know, when I know that salmon is sacred for a lot of the tribes. And that's also why we put a lot of emphasis in designing a system where they can escape. And also that we are, you know, very, I would say vocal, it's not the right word, but we were addressing it because I know it is a concern. In Washington State, you had a net pen in the ocean. So that's basically a huge fish net where the fish swim in the ocean itself. Here they're swimming inside in tanks inside a building. So it's a completely different technology and setup for what you have in Washington State.
Marianne, do you want to add a little bit about working with the TIPOs, or would you like me to talk about that a little bit?
You can talk about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that's been important in Nordic is meeting with local tribal representatives. We've been doing that since the beginning, and my job has been just to help facilitate those meetings and those communications. So we've met early with the Yurok Tribe, with Trinidad Rancheria, with Blue Lake. We actually went up to a tribal meeting in Smith River. Pretty early on, we met with Bear River. The other thing is site specifically, and that was to address any concerns that people had. And then more site specifically, we've been working with Jamie Roscoe, who is a local archaeologist and cultural resources consultant. And it was Jamie's job really to survey the site, see if there might be any sensitive areas with cultural resources. And Jamie not only consulted with the 3 closest TIPOs, which are tribal historic preservation, I'm getting it wrong, historic preservation officers. From Bear River, from Blue Lake, and from the Yurok Tribe. And not only did Jamie consult with them, the Nordic folks encouraged him, actually asked him, not quite directed, but pretty close to it, to actually meet with those folks on site, so that those TIPOs, those tribal representatives, could tour the site, could talk to Jamie about areas where they might have concerns about resources being on site, or they just might want him to further explore whether or not there might be resources. And so Jamie worked very closely with them as far as surveying the site, looking for potentially sensitive areas. And that went really well. And then as a next step, Nordic has actually agreed to have a cultural resources monitor on site whenever the ground is disturbed. So not only did Jamie do his studies consulting with the TIPOs, but when they start construction, if there's any possibility that some sort of cultural resource might be disturbed or found, there's going to be a monitor on site that has the expertise to recognize that sort of material. Let's say it's a shell mound or something else. And if that ever happens with that cultural resources monitor there, they can stop that construction at that point and further explore it and see if it's a sensitive area or see what's going on there, so that Nordic's just sure all along the way that they are in no way disturbing anything that might have any sort of cultural significance to the tribe. And then as well as that, we also, I think I failed to mention, we met with the Yurok Tribe as well, and we're continuing to reach out to the tribes. We know that they're very busy right now, that there's a lot of things going on with COVID, and especially if they're comfortable with the project, they might not necessarily have a lot of time to talk to Nordic, but hopefully I've done a good job, and Nordic's done a good job of letting them know we're always available. And if not, like Trinidad, it's been a while, so certainly if Trinidad wants to talk again, that would be great. We met with Garth Sundberg before, and we've met with Ryan. And Jackie knows that we're available. But if anybody's got anybody else that you think we ought to meet with, please let me know.
Thanks, Lynette. Susan Halpin has a couple questions. She's wondering about the supply of eggs. How are they produced? How do you assure the genetic diversity and quality? And then also, how long does it take to produce marketable fish from egg to harvest?
Well, you need an egg import license, so and it needs to be verified and controlled and approved by a veterinary for each batch that you import. And talking import might be anything that's from out of California is an import. So if it's from Idaho, it's still an import, or from Washington State. You need to put the eggs in quarantine, and it needs to get a health certificate before you can put them into the hatchery. From egg to harvest, it takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months to grow. And that's because we're not using any kind of growth hormones or enhancers, etc. So, but we do have the benefit of having a consistent environment for the fish. Like normally they would live in the ocean where it's seasons. We don't have that seasonality, so they grow a little faster than in nature.
Thank you. John Olson says I heard the existing boiler and generator have some value, and what will happen to those?
We have a local company that is assessing our demolition plan right now, and I think we plan to sell anything of scrap value, that we can. But there will be a professional demolition plan for in the project, and there will be a third party, of course, demolishing that for us. So yes, I assume that there's steel, or there might be some scrap value from it. So
Mary, I was just going to add a little bit to that. I know years ago I was actually, as an independent contractor, I was working with the Harbor District because they were hoping to sell the boiler and they did not have luck. If the Harbor District can find a way to actually rehome that equipment, I'm sure they will do so. I just know they haven't been successful so far.
Thanks, Lynette. Lori Tumis, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much again. Okay, I'm wondering, is it already in the works that the company will definitely come to here, or will we as a public be able to voice our input or concerns as we did with the wind farms?
There will be a public process when we apply for the permits. So there will be a public information, public hearings and public information and comment periods. Most likely, we anticipate to submit the permits late this fall. So I hope either before or after Christmas. How that's going to be conducted with the COVID, I'm not sure yet. But there will be, that's required in any kind of permitting application process. So yes, there will be public comment periods.
So Marianne, do you mind if I add on to that?
And anything you could always reach out and ask questions too.
And that was what I was going to add. Lori, if you've got any questions, or it's even better if there's a group, or if you've got a service club or that sort of thing. One of the things I've really appreciated in working with Nordic is they are willing and open and ready to meet with absolutely anyone. So that if anybody's got questions or concerns, please do reach out to me. I'll connect you with Marianne, or they've got other folks with specific expertise on their team. And Marianne's very good if she doesn't have specific answers. We can refer you to folks that can get you those answers. So please, if you've got any questions or concerns about the project, please do reach out. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and I'm available anytime. So please do reach out.
I was going to also add, if you can't get a hold of Lynette, you can always contact OLLI, and I can connect you with Lynette as well. Susan Halpin has some more questions. She says she knows that you haven't completed the DEQA yet, but do you have a preliminary estimate of the impact of traffic and additional trucking activities?
I would assume, based on the main facility, and this is the same size, there will be anywhere between 15 to 20 trucks a day. That's an estimate, but I don't have the final number yet.
And similarly, Richard would like to know something about the workforce.
Okay, workforce. We will be. There are two phases. One is construction, of course, the project. We are working with both the local operating engineers, but I'm also listening to the other local construction companies to see if we can find a good solution. We want to use as much local workforce as possible. Of course, you know, it will require some skills and it will require some experience. And hopefully as much as, you know, locally as possible. When it comes to the farm itself, and I would say we would need anywhere between 200 and 300 people, depending on what time, you know, the time of the construction and what activities goes on. Once the farm is in operation, we anticipate to recruit a lot of the resources locally. There might be some experts that we can't find, but one of the reasons why we came to Humboldt is that you have a good, you know, workforce, and you have HSU, and you have a lot of people with interest in marine biology and aquaculture, etc. And we're also working with the College of the Redwoods to develop a certificate and an associate degree program for people that could actually work on the farm itself.
That's great news. Jane, you have another question?
Sure do. Is there a way to compare the nutritional value of the fish you produce with the nutritional value of, for say, wild-caught salmon?
Yes, there is. I mean, it could always compare to the nutritional value will be there, you know, comprised of basically two different things. One's the feed, and the other is, you know, the breed, the actual species. Yes, depending on how you select your feed. For example, I can give you an example. If you have too much soy protein, you get a imbalance in the omega-3 and 6 compared to like a wild-caught fish. That's why you always try to find ingredients in fish. And there's been a huge revolution in fish feed over the last you know, decade or so. So you always look for a fish feed that is has as little impact on the environment as possible, meaning using a low percentage of marine proteins as possible, but still that has a sufficient and right balance between omegas 3s and 6. Yes, there is, you know, it is possible, and traceability is important for consumers. So once you start producing fish, you will have full traceability in what the fish has eaten and the nutritional value of it.
Will you do that testing yourself in-house?
Yes, we will, and we will disclose. I mean, basically what you can do, I mean, you can buy a fish, and of course you can test it, but you know, it's also disclosed what the fish eat and how it's produced. So in that sense, you know, it's also, you know, a lot of the information is also open to third parties. So yes.
This harks back to the issue of farm raised versus wild caught, and the concern about the feed, about the antibiotics, about the kind of feed. And basically many say avoid farm raised. If you're trying to feed them comparably and get the same nutritional result without the GMOs, etc., that will help a lot in terms of marketing the final product, because farm-raised fish, among many nutritionists that I listen to, basically say avoid them like the plague because of the antibiotics, etc. And you're saying you won't have that issue, but that's why I'm asking about the nutritional comparisons.
Yeah. Hardly any farms use antibiotics. I know, I mean, I know from Europe, they don't. I know there has been from other areas, South America, for example, a more prevalent use of antibiotics. We never used it before, but it's personally, I try to avoid antibiotics, but if I were really sick and that would cure me, I would probably use it. If you were to use it, it's also a fish health welfare issue. They would be quarantined. You cannot sell them. So they would be quarantined for at least 30 or 60 days until any trace of any antibiotic would be out of the fish. But it never happened, and I as long as you have good biosecurity measures, that shouldn't happen. But it's always a contingency plan in any kind of farm. But yes, we're pretty clear that we're not going to use antibiotics in the feed, and we're going to try to avoid GMOs as well. So, and that's important. We're trying to produce a high quality food, and consumers expect transparency and traceability. So that will be, out in the open. Yes.
Hey, Marianne, do you mind if I just add one little thing to that? And this is just based on some of the conversations that I've had here in Humboldt. I think when people think about farmed fish, whether they're familiar with the technology or not, you're more talking about net pens, which is literally kind of cages in the ocean with the fish in those cages. So the mobility is limited, as well as the ability to control the environment, the things coming in and the things that the fish are exposed to, as far as sea lice, as far as other things that might be in the water. But the other thing to think about too is in a situation like that, there's no way to control what then goes out into the ocean. So feed residue, fish waste, and if those fish do need to be medicated for some reason or treated, or the GMO feeds are used, all of that ends up in the ocean because none of those things can be filtered out. The big difference here, and I know Nordic, because there's just a lot of farm fish, but I think it's really important to differentiate and understand that Nordic's technology allows them to control absolutely everything going out. All of that is tested. Such a high percentage of everything is filtered out before the water goes out. So it's just a very different technology, and the exposure both to the fish and to the environment is very different than what we traditionally think of from farmed fish.
Okay, I want to note that it's 1 o'clock, and Marianne, you need to leave to go catch a plane. So perhaps I want to thank you ever so much for agreeing to participate with us and educate us, because we've had a lot of questions and you've addressed a lot of them, maybe all of them. And if you haven't, maybe you can stick around, Lynette, and because I think Richard has another question. But again, I want to thank Marianne so very much for giving this presentation. Anybody want to clap? Feel free to clap. Right, I'll get it out.
I know I see there's a few more questions. I could just briefly address a few of them, and I guess Lynette could probably address the other ones. It says if the building are enclosed, what does the sunlight play? Yes, you do have lighting, and there's photo lighting inside a building to mimic a natural pattern. The water, will it require chilling? Yes, it will. How will other energy requirements impact local generation capacity? I'm not sure if I understand that question, but yes, it will. We will have solar panels on all the roofs. That's only a fraction, and the rest will be sourced. So are we paying for a cultural resource monitor? Yes, we are. Well, that's from Lynette, yes.
There's another question in here. I just want to make sure that we didn't skip it. It's Gary's asking, could Atlantic salmon be used, and could the feed include ocean harvested fish or krill? Which would mean marine food web impacts.
Yes, Atlantic salmon can be used. It's one of the species that's bred for fish farming. And it would be, I think, also beneficial in a sense locally, so you wouldn't go head on in competition with the local fishermen, which I think they think is important. That's the feedback we get. If the feed can include ocean harvested fish or krill, yes, you do want to make sure that you don't take any kind of foraged fish or any deplete the ocean of marine proteins that can be used for other purposes. But you can use natural ingredients, algae oils, insects, other marine elements, and the fish component of fish feed has gone down from like 50% to down to 10-15% as of today. And what's also important is that what's called the feed conversion ratio in land-based farming is very low. So it's like 1 to 1, 1 to 1.1, 1.05, which means that you don't feed the fish very much more than they produce or that they grow. So that also keeps it down to a lower level of use of marine proteins, for example, from the ocean. So, but you work with professional feed suppliers to create food that works in the system, but you can work with them to get the right components and into the fish feed. Okay.
I don't see any other questions in the comments or in the chat. And I also want to echo what Jane said. Thank you so much for your great presentation. And I hope you see all these great comments in the chats thanking you and just reiterating the importance of this project for our economy. So again, thank you so much for being here, Marianne and Lynette, and we really appreciate it. And Jane, you want to share what's going to happen next week?
You bet. Next week we have Patty Stammer, who's here watching today, and Jack Durham of the Union, Mad River Union, will be talking about writing your obituary, which is, of course, a good endpoint for this conversation. But it should be interesting, and obviously it gets you to think about your life and how you want to live it, or how you want to change how you're living it. So we look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you so much, both Lynette and Marianne.
Yeah, I did, just before people get off, I just want to reiterate, if anyone's got any questions, if your questions didn't get answered today, please feel free to email me. It sounds like you can get my contact information through OLLI. If you have a service club or another social group, or even just some friends that you think might be interested in learning more about the Nordic project, I'm happy to set something up. So please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Lynette.